Evening and welcome to Normal Island. Curtis was going to be doing this show, but I formed the Department of Turn Left Efficiency and we've had him fired for not responding to my email on his weekend off. As such, I'm Cog. I'll be your host until the end of the show, or until Curtis's union works out where I live, whichever one comes first. This evening, we'll be looking at the German elections, Becky Goodwin's terrible experience appearing on the UK's worst podcast, and Elon's war on federal employees. Some people who you might be a bit dependent on in the near future, who knows? And for the first time ever, it is my pleasure to be joined by Damien, aka Kerno Damo. Damien produces fantastic YouTube commentary on UK politics, and you'll need to check out his YouTube if you aren't already. One of the best leftist YouTubers we've got, and Cornish legend. Damien, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm very even better after that introduction. My head won't fit on this screen before much longer. You carry on like that. I like you. You can replace Curtis anytime.
It's well deserved. It's well deserved. And like Curtis' union will eventually catch up. But we've got some time. The union laws in this country are pretty strict, so we should be able to keep him off camera for at least this show, maybe till the next show. All right, so. Don't forget to like and share the live. It helps us out massively and allows us to keep the show going. As usual, Damien and I will be reading through your comments, and we'll be joined by our producer, who today is Sarah. So do keep commenting your thoughts as we go through the stories. All right, on to our first story then. The first major elections since Donald Trump was elected have taken place in Germany with an extraordinarily high turnout. The CDU and ADF have dominated in German polls. For those who don't know German politics, or how the Bundestag operates, it's roughly the equivalent of the Conservative Party winning the majority here and Reform coming a close second. It's their centre-right and far-right. However, an unexpected result was the left-wing party, Die Linke, that you can see there, surging above the 5% threshold in the past 2 weeks to a full 8% of the vote. Although this won't turn German politics around, it could make a significant difference in how political strategists view tackling the rise of the far right around the world, right? I think we've got to think about the wider implications of this. And what's the reason for that? Because they outperformed expectations by being unapologetically left-wing and boldly standing up for what they believe in. Die Linke have done incredibly well on that front. While Keir Starmer produced snivelling appeal to the far right with deportation videos, Die Linke went entirely the other way round with social media videos like this.
Hier stimmt doch was nicht.
Du kannst 40, 50 Stunden die Woche ackern und am Ende des Monats wird deine Karte an der Supermarktkasse trotzdem abgelehnt.
Immer mehr Menschen haben Angst vor neuen Rechnungen im Briefkasten oder aus ihrer Wohnung zu fliegen.
Weil die Mieten einfach unbezahlbar sind.
Nein, nicht mit uns. Wieder zurück.
Aber irgendwie ist nie jemand daran schuld.
Nicht die gescheiterten Ampelparteien und auch nicht die CDU, die davor regiert hat.
Vor der Wahl versprechen sie uns das Blau vom Himmel. Bezahlbare Lebensmittel. Bezahlbare Mieten. Eine sichere Zukunft für unsere Kinder. Gute Pflege und mehr Busse und Bahnen. Kein Versprechen haben sie gehalten.
Und nach der Wahl helfen sie vor allem ihren reichen Freunden, sich die Taschen noch voller zu machen. Aber für unsere Probleme interessieren sie sich überhaupt nicht. Das ist doch keine ehrliche Politik. Die Menschen in Deutschland verdienen eine Partei, die für sie arbeitet und nicht für die Superreichen. Eine, die es wirklich ernst meint.
Eine Partei, die die Mieten wirklich deckeln will.
Eine, die die Lebensmittelpreise wirklich senken will.
2 Roster bitte.
Danke, Bodo.
Eine, die nicht nach unten tritt. Eine, die Konzerne und Reiche zur Kasse bittet und eine, die ihre Versprechen auch nach der Wahl hält.
Die Linke, wir legen uns für dich mit denen da oben an.
Das macht ja sonst keiner.
Deshalb am 23. Februar die Linke wählen.
Notice how they unapologetically point straight to a villain, right? Literally pointing up at the skyscraper and identifying their enemy. The left, in my opinion, needs to be a bit meaner and start boldly pointing out villains exactly like this. Don't be too nice about it. Don't follow the far right and go, oh, well, we could be a little bit more right-wing than the right wing, you know, on whether that's on immigration or people on benefits. Go full ham on the left and produce content that says, we are correct, come join us. Argue for left-wing positions strongly. The left has such an advantage in social media users as well, who are overwhelmingly young and overwhelmingly more left-wing in most Western countries. We should all be learning from Die Linke's campaign right now, their campaign strategy, and how they are with young voters in particular. However, as Financial Times polling expert John Byrne Murdoch has laid out, there is also a gender divide. Like everywhere else in the world, young men tend to be going to the right, although plenty did also vote for Die Linke and the Greens, it's worth pointing out, while young women are holding the line and voting overwhelmingly for left-wing parties. This gender divide is quite interesting. Now, obviously, we're focusing on the positives, and it is scary seeing the openly Nazi-affiliated AfD getting a full 20% of the vote. But this was kind of expected. It fits not only with historical trends, but also polling trends. It's kind of what you'd expect at this moment in history, and with recent German polling, it's what you'd expect. Die Linke is a different story. Although Die Linke gained significantly less of the Bundestag, it bucked the historical and polling trends and might show us the key to future success. So I'm interested to know, Damien, what did you make of these election results and the rise of Die Linke particularly?
Yeah, as you said, the election results were broadly expected. I think some people were hoping your Elon Musks, your Nigel Farages, they were hoping the AfD was going to do a little bit better than they did, and they didn't. Now they're going to be kept out of power completely because German politics, German governments always end up being coalitions, and that is exactly what will happen again this time round. Maybe the Greens are getting into the coalition to run the country as a possibility, which would be interesting. Although the German Greens are not quite the same as the Green Party of England and Wales, which I'm a member of, I would suggest that the German Greens are a fair bit more right-wing than that. The Die Linke result was unexpected, like you said. Nobody expected the left to quite jump, and they certainly did put their all into their campaigning. Those ad videos were really quite well produced. They did not cut corners with such things. It wasn't just some dry politician sat in an office somewhere, orating to an audience saying this is way things should be done. This is, you should vote for me because I'm bland, boring. I'm a plasterboard offcut. You can trust me to keep things the same. Broadly speaking, I won't rock the boat. But people want somebody who's going to actually rock the boat, and so the narrative that Die Linke were putting out there, as that video showed, it did hit the mark for them in a lot of ways, and they did tell people a lot of things they want to hear as well. Sick and tired of no end of change. I mean, goodness knows we know in this country, you voted for change. Did you vote for Labour? Did you vote for change? Did you get it? Did you? Well, there's the same story in Germany as well, really. I mean, and they have so many different right-wing parties. You just wonder which flavour and which combination of them you're going to end up with each and every time. But the AfD being kept out is the big positive. Die Linke, left wing, yes. Are they saying the right things here? Yes. If they got into power, would they actually deliver them, or would they go down the Keir Starmer route? I have reservations, and the reason I have reservations is Die Linke's ongoing problem, as it would appear, with the subject of Palestine. And this is something I talk about a huge amount, as you know, on my YouTube channel, the issues in the Middle East. There was Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine and the occupied Palestinian territories. She was due to be in Germany, in Berlin, to give a speech as part of the DiEM25, and Die Linke, amongst other parties, were demanding it be cancelled, demanding it be called off. That's not the left to me. The left isn't making that kind of argument, and that tells me there's a note of caution when it comes to Die Linke. It is the left as far as Germany goes. They're it. You can have as many different combinations of right-wing parties as you want. There is only Die Linke that represent the left, but it's left inverted commas from my perspective. And would, you said, getting into power, getting into majority power, it just doesn't happen in Germany. If they were to ever hold the reins of power, they would end up being in coalition with somebody who is going to be more right wing than them, and that's going to make them even. It's going to drag the Overton window across again. So
Yeah.
yes, I agree that if they got in, that would certainly be different for Germany. It would be better for Germany, but I don't want to kind of, crown them with laurels, so to speak.
Yes.
I think they've still got a way to go. I hope they continue in that direction, though.
In the context of German politics, I would say that they are extraordinarily left wing. Like in the context of current German politics, but Germany always comes with that caveat because of their attitude towards Israel. That I think the phrase is something like "find somebody who loves you as much as Germany loves being on the wrong side of history." Right? they love it. They can't get enough of being on the wrong side of history. It's just their thing. It's just the worst of all combinations. But I think there's a couple of caveats to it. The current political makeup of Germany. The first is that contradiction with the AfD can't hold up much longer, right? You can't. Now, obviously, we all know that you can be a Nazi and be like pro-Israel. There's no contradiction there in reality. But making that clear to the average German will probably that'll probably become clearer as the AfD enter the limelight. Their Nazi connections are reasonably well known. I don't feel like I need to say allegedly because it's so it's been proven so many times that they've got so many connections to literal Hitler celebrating Nazis. But the other I think interesting thing is, and I think you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, is that a lot of right-wing populism relies on you being outside the political establishment to some degree. So in the UK, Reform have had success, even though they're essentially the same as the right wing of the Conservative Party. The differences politically are pretty nil. The difference between Kemi Badenoch and Richard Tice is you're talking millimeters of political difference. But the fundamental difference is they've recently been in power, and I wonder if the AfD might find that it's harder to separate themselves if they're in the current government, if they're at the centre of power, for them to convince people that they are outsiders and anti-establishment. I don't know what you think that might do to their politics, but maybe I'm misreading.
I suppose the trap for them is similar to the sort of thing that you see in Le Pen in France. How many times have they nearly got there, or people thought they were going to get there, and they're going to get over the line? They're actually going to have a fascist government this time, and it never quite ends up happening. And you might find this is a similar case here with the AfD. The last thing anybody wants to see is one of these awful parties get into power in any way, shape, or form.
Sorry, could you repeat that last? You cut out for me. I don't know if it cut out for anyone else.
I was just saying that it's the last thing anybody really wants to hear is one of these parties getting anywhere near power in any way, shape, or form. As I said with the Le Pen example with France, they always get talked up quite heavily, and the polling seems to point to them quite heavily in their right-wing media, and they make a big thing of their making advances. And of course, we're seeing the same here in this country with Reform. Every time they get 1 or 2 points up in a poll, all of a sudden the Daily Mail is wetting itself with glee and that kind of thing. But it doesn't actually amount to a whole hill of beans. It doesn't translate necessarily into power, and that's what has been shown in France. You hope that's the sort of thing that would end up happening in Germany too, but of course history teaches us it has happened before. It did happen before. It can easily happen again, and for it to be Germany of all countries, for it to happen again, would be extremely unfortunate. But yeah, don't really have much more to add to that on that score, really. You just don't want them anywhere near power, and they need exposing for what they are and who they are and their true colours, no matter how much they get bigged up in various mainstream media outlets, because of course you've got people constantly promoting these parties. You've had Elon Musk pushing the AfD heavily. He sunk millions, billions, I don't know how much it was now, into campaigning for this horrendous party, which speaks volumes of him, and it speaks volumes of his own background, frankly, and it speaks volumes of what he's doing in America as well, which we're going to come on to. But equally, you're getting that same fixation with Reform UK in this country too. It's a dangerous road that you're seeing reflected in all manner of different countries, including ours. You've got GB News. You've got Talk TV, Murdoch's TV station, passing him saying, hey, it's not just papers, it's televised news as well that he's polluting our minds with. And they're basically two channels that just cheerlead 24/7 for Farage and co. And
Yes.
you don't get any balance, because then you have the BBC who will platform the same people, or they'll have GB News presenters to ask them their opinions, and that's not balance either. You're just reiterating and reinforcing the right-wing narrative over and over again, and you don't get the alternative. And when the BBC is supposed to be all about balance, it's no wonder more and more people are switching them off, is it? But
Yes.
as far as Germany goes, you just really hope for their own history books that they don't go here again, really.
Yes, people are probably going to think I'm beating a dead horse, because I think I say this every single show, but also Keir Starmer playing into it by saying actually they're right about the migrants. We need to bring migration down, rather than actually defending the idea that migration doesn't actually harm the country. That also doesn't help, because it just reinforces what's already been enforced by those media organisations that you mentioned.
And that's an incredibly important point you're actually making there, because Keir Starmer is aping the language of Reform UK. He's calling Nigel Farage dangerous, and then he's going ahead and doing the same thing. Anyway, he's coming out with the same rhetoric. We have three right-wing parties in this country now. Labour is not the left, nothing like the left anymore. It just isn't. That's gone. It won't be Corbyn. Say bye-bye to it. Labour is as bad as the Tories, which is as bad as Reform UK. There's bag papers difference between all three of them now, especially when it comes to issues like migration, as you say. It's a disgrace, the language of it, and it said a lot that the highest judge in the land, Sue Carr, called Starmer and Bad Knockout for their language at Prime Minister's questions. And I've covered this this story on my channel as well, just tearing them to shreds, essentially. And you have to remember that Starmer is supposedly a human rights barrister. This was his bread and butter once upon a time. This is what he sold himself to the country as. This is who I am. I am the Director of Public Prosecutions. I presided over the Crown Prosecution Service. But did I actually believe in human rights law at all when you hear what I'm saying now?
No.
I don't think he did. I think he was in it for the paycheck. I don't think he believes in human rights any more than Nigel Farage does, even though Farage would probably ditch them and would ditch them. He said it numerous times he would scrap the Human Rights Act. I don't think Starmer necessarily would go that far yet, unless it suited him to do so. But the minute it does suit him to do so, watch this space.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a situation we're in now where you can't really believe that Keir Starmer's a human rights lawyer. I mean, that's particularly prevalent with it's true of the migration stuff, but I always think it's particularly prevalent when we're looking at all of the kind of excuses and stuff that he'll make for what Israel does, the genocide going on in Palestine right now. But also, I think it's worth reiterating as well that the Nazis never won an election. They never beat every other party in an election.
No.
They seized power. So you don't need to get a whole load of them in order for it to be a real problem. And it is something that we're going to have to be vigilant for in the future, because frankly, they don't give a fuck about what is, procedural. They're not playing by the same rules as everybody else. If they see an opportunity to seize power, they'll take it. So that's something we do have to be wary of as well going forward. Did you have any final thoughts on these German elections?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's been a surprise to a lot of people that Die Linke have done as well as they have. I think Die Linke have a way to go still, but they should learn from this success, build on what they've achieved here, and go forward realizing that actually they may be onto something. And I hope that continues to carry forward into other policy areas, and notably the issue with Israel and Palestine, because they have got a long way to go on that. But obviously domestic policy, as far as Germans go, is going to be a lot more important, you would imagine, to a lot more people. And on that score, they were hitting the right note. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, improvements, but not perfection on any front.
No, yeah. Well, there's no such thing as perfection. Nobody's expecting that. Nobody should ever get that. No matter who you vote for, it's always going to be a compromise, because you're going to agree with them on some things and you're going to disagree with them on others. But when they are avowedly on the side of the perpetrators of a genocide, you've got to improve from that.
Yes, yeah, Yeah, I think that there has to be improvements made there. All right, I think we should go on to our second story. So, Rebecca Goodwin is an OF model and business owner who uses the $100K a month she makes each month to support low-income families with cheap rental support. Goodwin is well known on TikTok for her commentary and raising awareness of the challenges faced by sex workers and the working class more generally in the UK. Last week, Goodwin travelled 3 hours from her home to go and do a volunteer guest appearance on the worst podcast in the UK. The podcast is called the Reality Check Podcast, and their whole thing is bringing on women who do OF modelling and mocking them. When Goodwin arrived on the podcast, this is how they introduced her.
And make sure you click the link down below, and yeah, that will do us wonders, please. Anyways, today we have hoe number one.
Hey.
What's your name?
Wow, it's Rebecca Goodwin.
Just in case you missed that, she did a nervous laugh and he mocked her laugh. Just straight into it with the cruelty. No hesitation.
What's your name?
Wow, it's Rebecca Goodwin.
What's your name?
And this was the attitude that they generally took throughout the podcast, telling her that she added nothing to society, that women should shave certain parts of their body, bringing up the most embarrassing stories that they could, and constantly speaking over her, like constantly. This culminated in Goodwin walking off the podcast and telling them that they were the most disrespectful people she'd ever met, and I'm inclined to agree.
The
UK,
Maldives
mate.
or
Wait, they've seen Cornwall on the
Let me finish.
We know they want to be in the UK now.
There've obviously been other places, but the plan was if they liked the
Where,
motorhome.
no, but like other countries.
You know what? I'm gonna get off now. You lot are the most disrespectful people I've ever met.
What? We was only joking.
No, trust me. You lot are getting fucking rich as shit now.
Are you being serious?
Yeah, I'm being dead serious.
Hey, goodbye. What the fuck?
That is mad.
What?
So the kids want to be in the UK because they're gonna go to Chester, to Sheffield, to Cornwall.
Guys, do you think we did anything wrong there? Like, were we...
She was just delusional, mate.
The
Story.
Maldives or
So, was she delusional? Like, we all saw the way you were treating her, the way you were speaking to her. She kept her dignity, but she was rightfully upset, and she filmed this video on her way home.
Story time! So I've just driven 3 hours, or I've been driven 3 hours to Croydon to do a podcast, okay? Now this was an unpaid podcast. I thought I was helping people out. I was happy to come all this way with no payment whatsoever to try and, you know, be in with the scene. And when I got there, it was 3 men in their apartment, and they sat me down. They showed me a patch of water on their sofa where they made the last guest squirt. They then decided to talk over me the whole podcast so that I couldn't say anything. They told me that I was a waste of space and I did nothing for society. I mean this with all disrespect, the Reality Check show, but I paid £238,000 in tax last year. What the fuck did your podcast do for society? You know what, it's really funny because one of the guys that was there is literally an OnlyFans model, and all they do is drag OnlyFans girls down to absolutely rip them to shit. Now, I am very, very lucky that someone decided to bring me here today, because I was going to come on my own, thinking it would be like a proper studio and everything, but it wasn't. It was just 3 horrible men that decided to rip me to shit and refuse to let me speak. Now, their views on women as a whole is just horrible, because as I was sat there waiting, I was a little bit late, so they said, for the next podcast girl, they said, oh, I better let this bitch know that we're going to be late. I mean, they've already been demonetized on YouTube, which I'm glad about, but I hope nobody subscribes to their new Patreon, because they are literally horrible, horrible, toxic men bringing women in. They even said they never get any views when it's men. They told me to wear a slutty outfit. and they just ripped me to shit. And now I just have to go back home. And they made me sign the model release form before, which should have been a red flag. But they've just shared me crying on Instagram to promote them. Like, I've been on so many podcasts, guys, and you know I can take banter, you know I can take a joke, but that was me sat on my own with 3 men being bullied.
It's heartbreaking to see Becky breaking down like that, and it's so interesting that they can't see what they did wrong. Like, they were actively confused when she left. Despite it being a disgusting and genuinely harrowing situation, I do want to point out, though, that she showed how intelligent and resilient she was throughout the whole thing in the face of some pretty stupid questions.
You say it's no dignity, but there's no dignity in going out to work for somebody that's really, really rich. I'm talking Tesco's, right? You're going to go, what is the dignity in setting your alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning to get up to go and make their pockets even bigger and give them more money while you're sat there all day?
You're comparing the OnlyFans to a
Absolutely.
Even that, I'm not going to lie, even that has more
Absolutely.
dignity than what you do.
Please explain to me how getting up in the morning to line some rich
you're doing
man's
something
pocket,
positive for society, I guess.
Positive. £238,000 was my tax bill this year. Okay, I'm doing something positive for society by paying the lot of your wages.
Okay, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if we went back to
caveman times, why do their arguments always start with some stupid shit like that? Yes, you might be paying enough tax to pay for like multiple NHS annual salaries and run a charity helping low-income families. But if we went back to caveman times, to which the correct answer is, shut up, nerd, you wouldn't have a fucking podcast in caveman times. Sorry, let's just hear Rebecca Goodwin's response, because it's better than mine. Go on.
Which we're not in, yeah.
We're actually going to have some constructive
if we went
production
back to
coming from people
so why
that are
don't
doing
you go
those
out
jobs.
there and kill a cow instead of shopping at Tesco's? Let's go
But
back to caveman times.
There are people doing that, though.
But
and
we're not in caveman
you wouldn't be able to
times.
eat your burgers if there weren't people doing that. Whereas you getting your minge out on OnlyFans is
I'll tell you something,
adding nothing productive to our society. If anything, it's damaging our society.
Except from the tax bill, the £238,000 that I paid on the 31st of January this year.
I was talking about girls that are.
How is that
I was talking about if a girl was earning £1,000.
How are the NHS nurses going to get paid without these tax bills?
Let's try not talk over each other, by the way.
I was talking about the girls that are earning £1,000 a month, and comparing it to someone who works in Tesco.
These girls do not belong to society. These girls are their own girls. These girls do not have to contribute anything to society. A society that gives you what? Which
you could see that Becky just outclasses them on every level. She's making an appeal to the rules-y indifference principle of wealth redistribution, i.e. the least wealthy should have the easiest time with taxation because they've gained the least from our current system. And then you've got caveman times over here, furrowing his brow, trying to work out what she's saying. Like this. Furrowing his brow, trying to work out what she's saying. Damien, what size rocks do you think Caveman Times and his friend should bash together on their next podcast? And what did you make of how they treated Becky Goodwin, of course?
I'm just trying to work out what the F on the side of his head means. I'm thinking F knows, because there's clearly nothing going on between his two ears.
Yes.
I mean, if he dragged his knuckles off the floor for 5 minutes and listened to what she had to say, she was making some pretty excellent points there. I didn't see the podcast. I'm familiar with it. It's not my cup of tea whatsoever, as you might imagine. I have seen, I'm on TikTok as well. If you're on TikTok and you haven't seen Becky Goodwin's videos come up, frankly, the girl's hilarious on TikTok. Never mind what she does on OF. She is hilarious. She's ever so funny. So you will have seen these videos come up because they have been shared to death. I mean, that video of her crying in the back of the taxi or whatever car she was in, I think it's had about 5 million views at this point. You can't help but have seen what these 3 idiots did to this poor woman. And it doesn't matter what she does for a living. I mean, she has 2 kids, young kids. She's only about 30 herself, I think. She needed to provide. She found a way to do that and then some. And then she's found a way to give back to society in the same way. These idiots aren't doing anything for society. They've already been demonetized from YouTube. Is that not enough of a big red flag that what you're doing and what you're saying is a bit well, dickheadish, shall we put it. I can't help but sorry for swearing. I can't help but swear. It's so angering. It's so unnecessarily cruel what they've done to her. But as I'm sure you're going to mention, not only has she been able to buy herself a house and provide for her children, buy herself a car, she's been buying more houses from that. And she set up basically her own housing association so that people on low incomes can afford to have somewhere to live and have the dignity that she was making a big point of saying that people deserve to have. I mean, as the comment that just came up there very quickly, OF is just another social media platform. What you choose to do on it, it's not actually entirely of an adult nature necessarily. Plenty of people go on there and do not take their clothes off and do other things. It's just what it's best known for.
Yeah.
And this podcast just exists to just belittle people who do use that platform in an adult manner, probably. But that's their business. That's what they choose to do for a living. Nobody's forced them to it. They're not being coerced. They haven't got a pimp or something like that floating around. They're not high on drugs and are having to do what goodness knows what to fund a habit or anything like that. This is a choice they've made. They can make a damn good living out of it. And they pay their taxes and pay their dues and contribute to this country, which of course then extends to everything that we all expect our taxes to be paid into, to running the NHS, running local councils and transport services and what have you else. That's what it's for. That's what she does. And she does a lot. £238,000 in tax. These pimples could only dream of making 10% of that.
Oh, yes.
And frankly, if they haven't been taken off Patreon is beyond me as well.
Yes, I mean, hopefully that's the next thing. Hopefully they get kicked off of Patreon. The comments are all calling for us to reach out and get Becky Goodwin on here, which would be brilliant. Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing. I would love to get Becky Goodwin on here and a representative of the ECP, the English Collective of Prostitutes, which is the I think it's the biggest sex workers union in the UK. Because I think we could have a really interesting conversation about protecting sex workers and how decriminalisation can help protect sex workers. I think that could be a really interesting conversation. But that's kind of beside the point of the conversation we're having right now. I thought it was telling that they thought they'd done nothing wrong. And I think that a lot of young men can learn a lesson about manosphere podcasts from watching this, because it was a real good demonstration, I think, of how the boys were like hyping each other up. You know, they were hyping each other up and laughing with each other, blah, 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 blah. And what they were completely ignorant to, what they were completely blind to, was how intelligent the woman sitting in front of them was, how misogynistic they were being, and how consistently they overspoke her, and the effect that ultimately had on their social relationship with her, which I think it might have been genuine surprise, I think, at least from one of them, that it had gone that way. Because I think that, like a lot of young men, they thought, oh, this is just how you treat women, because that's the habit of what they get into. They get into the habit of treating women in this disgusting misogynistic way that's reinforced by other men in the manosphere, and then they're really surprised when it doesn't work. But of course, that just reinforces the message, and the message he walked out with was, oh, she's delusional. She's delusional. That's the problem. So the problem becomes, oh, it's the woman's fault. It's something the woman's done wrong, rather than some self-reflection on what actually happened there was you were being a dickhead, and she walked out because you were being a dickhead. Do you know what I mean?
She was the only adult in the room, and as soon as she realised she was in there with a bunch of basically 3 boys giggling around the school lockers, laughing because, I don't know, they'd seen some dirty calendar in the teacher's common room or something like that, and they're having a little giggle about it. That's about the level of maturity we're at here. There are 3 Andrew Tate wannabes. Let's be honest. That's what they're subscribing to. That's what that's their ethos. That's their influence. That's who has made the impression on them, and that they think they can treat women in the manner that they do, and they do it repeatedly. Apparently, from what I can gather from Becky Goodwin's responses there, that there was someone else waiting in the wings, that this is normal for them, and these are the sort of people that they have on there to belittle. and run down, and they seem to get off on that. And for the life of me, I can't fathom why anybody would want to go on a podcast with three idiots like that who just basically get off on shaming others because they have so little going on in their own pathetic existences. It really is that simple. They've got nothing to offer society whatsoever. They can't stand the fact this young woman there, intelligent, eloquent, earns far more money than they do, is vastly more successful, not just in light of OF, but because of the housing housing association that she's put together and is building up, and plans to leave that as a legacy for her own children, I understand, as well. So she's putting together a plan for their futures as well, which all of us with children like to think we can do as well to some extent, but obviously probably not on that scale. And fair play to her for the success that she's had. But they can't stand it. As you said, misogyny is the name of the game here. You've got three guys there, nowhere near as successful as this woman, who's made vastly more money and has been vastly more successful than they have. They can't stand it, and all they've got is basically name calling and giggling, and it's really, really quite sad to watch three grown men act like 5-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, if you'd come on this podcast and that's not podcast, you know what I mean, the stream. If you'd come on the stream, and the first thing I did as you were being introduced was, you laughed and then I mocked your laugh, I would expect you to walk off. I'd say she was like pretty tolerant, like really quite tolerant to not walk off at that moment, because I think I would have been tempted to walk off. She's a better guest than I would be. I would have been a lot more. I would have lost my temper a lot sooner.
Especially
she's
so resilient. She thought she was doing these guys a favour. She thought this was something positive that she was going on. So I question about how much she knew about the podcast in advance of giving that interview. I dare say if she knew a lot more about it, she would not have gone. She said herself she was very glad she didn't go on her own, and I think all of us are very glad that she didn't end up going on her own. But that's it was just disgusting. It was just, what else can you say to it? It was just truly vile. It was a horrible, vile thing to watch. Nobody should be treated in the manner that she was treated, and the fact that they think this is a business model that they can monetize. They go on Patreon. Please subscribe to our Patreon so you can watch us slag off somebody else next week who doesn't deserve it. I mean, who pays for that as well? I mean, as much as I can say these three individuals are truly bottom-feeding, pathetic individuals who I have nothing but contempt for. The only people I could possibly have more contempt for are the fools paying them and paying for this content. Who on earth is signed up to their Patreon? Because if it's public, well, not that I've visited, I wouldn't know, but still makes you wonder.
To quote a good friend of mine, facts. And that's a reference to Sarah, who just lost it in the background. Sarah is producing, and she was clapping as you were saying what you were saying. She was like clapping at the camera. Yeah, absolutely, like 100%. I just want to emphasize, Becky, you showed yourself to be like really intelligent on that, like every point. I've never seen Becky like in a proper like scenario where she's had to kind of debate like that before. But because like you, I've seen her mostly on TikTok when she's just talking to the camera, or she's talking kind of collaboratively with somebody else to the camera. Seeing her in that environment, it was just clear how like incredibly clever this woman is. I just want to emphasize that, because I feel like that's a strange positive that came out of this for me. I was like, oh God, she's really bright, and she's like just. I mean, it's not a surprise that she outclassed them. That's not a particularly high bar to clear, but like she was running rings around them.
But it also goes to show that this kind of stream, this kind of show, she would shine on as well. So if she would come on this show, I think she would. She really would shine. And another point I'll make is it takes a genius to be funny. And I don't know her from OnlyFans. That's not my bag. I'm a married man. But, I do know her from TikTok. Being on TikTok myself, and she's on there as well. And she's been such a big personality on TikTok, she is. I've come to know her from her comedy skits that she puts out on there, the funny little videos that she does that are truly hilarious. If she's clever, because you have to be clever to be funny. and she does it so well on there. That's why she's become so successful on there as well. So yeah, if somebody sends this video out to her later on or something, posts her a link, tell her to come on here. She will get treated vastly better. That I can guarantee.
Yes, yeah, and honestly, that's a positive we can look towards. This should be a celebration of like how fucking awesome Becky is. Yeah, big up to Rebecca Goodwin. Let's go on to our final story. So, I think it's worth saying that last week, de facto president of the divided states of America, Elon Musk, emailed all 2.3 million federal employees, demanding that they send a 5-bullet point list of their week's achievements and CC in their line manager. He gave them 48 hours to respond to the email and said that failure to respond would be taken as a resignation. This was followed up by Donald Trump and Elon Musk both posting this meme to social media. The meme shows SpongeBob SquarePants mulling over a list of what he got done, which lists cried about Trump and cried about Elon. Now, this is what I mean when I say that the left needs to be meaner, needs to be a little bit meaner, because the amount of memes that you could make about Donald Trump crying over things is endless. The man is extremely fragile, and you can bait reactions out of him so easily. Trump is a bully, and people want to see bullies get slammed. They want to see them get destroyed. We have to rip him to shreds a little bit. We have to mock him. Like, that is what people want to see. People do want to see a bit of conflict. The difference that makes it a bad idea for Trump and Elon Musk to be doing this to those federal employees is that those federal employees are vital to Trump's success, and irritating them is probably not a good idea. If they go on strike, it could make it almost impossible for Musk and Trump to get anything done. Now, they could just fire them all, right? They could just go, okay, we're just going to fire you all. But even if you ignore all of the tribunal/legal proceedings that they might face from that, they'd have to find millions of employees to fill those roles while everything was collapsing. Pissing off these employees and getting them thinking about strike action is probably not a smart move. Some of Trump's inner circle realized this and how much sensitive data might be at risk, and so requested that their employees refrain from responding. MAGA Trump appointee Kash Patel, who's the FBI director, was one of the people who requested that employees don't respond. This is important for two reasons. First, this is how fascists operate, right? Hitler's Reich had a similar polycratic structure. So you had Hitler at the top with various leaders underneath him vying for power and control. Joseph Goebbels and Alfred Rosenberg, both competing to control the Reich cultural sector, would be an example, right? There was constant fights between them, and they were constantly trying to get Hitler's approval for whatever project they were doing at the time, in competition with each other, trying to push the other one out. We could see a similar dynamic with Elon Musk and any one of Trump's other underlings. But secondly, it places federal employees in a precarious situation where they could be fired if they respond and fired if they don't, since their management has given them contradictory instructions, right? You've got Elon Musk saying one thing, you've got Kash Patel saying the other, and that uncertainty can be exploited by Trump to fire whoever he likes if they choose to do nothing and be compliant. If they choose strike action, hopefully, then there's a way forward. But if they don't, then essentially they're in a situation where they've done something wrong no matter what they do. And this is, I think, where it gets interesting and where I want to bring Damien in, because Damien, do you think this will end in a Liz Truss style collapse, or do you think that this chaos will allow them to pick off federal employees more easily?
Roll out the lettuces.
Roll out the
lettuces. What does he call it? Doge? Department of I can't remember what the G is now. Department of
Government.
Department of Government Efficiency. That's the one.
Yes.
Dumbasses of great enormity seems to be more would be a better analogy. Musk is a fascist. I mean, we know this. It's not news. Trump is a fascist. That's not news either. Doesn't matter that he's a carrot tone calamity creator of great propensity. Doesn't matter that he's done it all once already in president. They've made him president again. That I largely blame on Biden and Harris refusing to change their tune on Israel and Gaza. But hey, you've got Trump still funding Israel anyway, so what did that really change? Yeah, Musk is. I mean, he's not elected. He's been put in charge of this government department that he's named after his favorite Bitcoin or whatever it is, with the one with the dog on the front of it, or the Doge on the front of it. And he's not elected in any way, shape, or form. Nothing has just been passed by an act of Congress, so it's completely illegal for one. So how long he's going to last throwing his weight around like he is with these federal employees, I don't know. They've already had to row back once, I think, saying, "Oh no, he's not really in charge of Doge," but he is, and everybody knows it. So there's no good you saying stuff like that because nobody believes you. Trump's an established liar, and Musk is lying through his teeth as well, and he's waving his tiny hands around at the AfD in Germany and thinking, "Oh, wonderful, we're going to get the fashion over there." And then you remember that this is a guy who grew up benefiting from white supremacy and apartheid in South Africa and owes his entire fortune to that very background. It's no wonder he is the way he is, but it should be a klaxon warning to everybody that anything this guy stands for and anything he says, Space Karen, is going to be completely off the wall and off the charts. And no, you don't want to have you don't want to touch that with a barge pole, even though
like Space Karen
already has.
I like Space Karen as a descriptor. I think that's a pretty good one. Yeah, I think that they're playing a really risky game. They are playing a really risky game because I think but this is always the thing with fascists. They so often end up falling over their own feet because they're just too stupid to be able to keep a coalition together. Like they really, I mean, the example that I bring up is the Hungarians and the Romanians in the when they were fighting for Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front. Had to be separated. Like they literally had to put Germans in between the lines of Hungarians and Romanians, because if they didn't, they would end up fighting each other instead of fighting the Russians. And it's just like fascist coalitions are so fragile. It's the kind of disastrous stuff that, you know, that they will eventually collapse. It's just a matter of like how much damage can they do before they collapse.
It's those superiority complexes they have. It's the thin skin they have. It's the fact that they think they're all powerful and are beholden to none. And this is exactly what we're seeing here with Trump and with Musk. Nobody can tell them what to do. They're going to do their own thing anyway. This is why you got Donald Trump saying things like, "Oh, well, we're going to empty the Gaza Strip and put them all into Egypt and Jordan." And Egypt and Jordan are saying no, and Egypt is parking tanks on the border of Rafah, and Jordan are saying, "Well, it'll be war if you try it," even though Jordan aren't known for doing anything of the kind, and basically just sit there in the Middle East being westernized patsies for the most part. But even they've had enough of this. You can't rationalize with these people. You can't debate with them. They're going to continue to do stupid things. They won't have it that they're stupid things. They won't have it that it's damaging. These federal employees basically run America. Let's be honest, this is what they do. We sack a load of them off. Will you still need people to do those jobs? And you've got rid of the people who know how to do the job, so who are you going to replace them with? People who don't know what they're doing. Oh dear, we're going to have to unfire people then. And that's something that we've seen in the last few days as well. And it's just a calamity, and it's a mess. And the whole world is frankly laughing at them for the ineptitude that's on show. And for somebody like Musk, who has built a reputation on being so clever and so smart and for inventing all these wonderful things that he says he has, when he hasn't, he's just bought out the people who actually did come up with them. That's becoming more and more obvious the more he opens his mouth, frankly. And saying to people, "Oh, well, you need to prove what you're worth and what you've done in the last week, otherwise we're going to take it as your resignation." Well, it's no wonder their bosses have turned around and said, "Good God, the country will come to a grinding halt if that happens. Don't tell him anything, because then you've given him no grounds to sack you anyway." And for some reason, that's such a simple truth, and it's somehow completely gone over his head. So, you know, it doesn't say a lot for him, does it, really?
Yeah. I think, because there's actually no way of him going through, or I think they're hedging their bets that he won't go through all of their all of them one by one. But my worry is, as I said before, that could then be taken as pretext for firing them if they do, and if they don't, there's because you've got this like contradictory system. Everything's run sort of de facto, and if everything's run on de facto rather than de jure, if everything's run on, well, it's just ad hoc, we just make it up as we go along, then it's much harder to hold together a system, and it's much easier for like fascists who want to dismantle the administrative state in line with Project 2025 to do that, because they can just fire who they like. The rules are whatever they make up at the time, and I think that's kind of the way they like it, you know?
But equally, they've then got the situation where, I say, you've sacked off all these people. You've got these services, these departments, these work not getting done. And it's all been done by a guy who's not elected, has no remit to do it at all. So that's just going to end up in the court system. That's then going to cause a great deal of expense, a great deal of time wasting. This work is still not getting done. The American society, economy is all going to suffer as a result of that, military, whatever. It's all going to affect all departments along the line, because he's picking on everybody, all these federal employees who do all these manner of different jobs. And it's completely unsustainable. And what will end up happening is it will just collapse. These people will end up having to be reinstated. Who's going to get the blame for that? Will Trump blame Musk for it? He owes Musk too much. Will Trump accept the blame for himself? Don't be silly. He's as thin-skinned as they come. It's bound to be somebody. They will scapegoat somebody in the end for it, and I don't think much will end up changing, but it'll all quietly get put back to the way it was, because things are just simply going to blow up otherwise. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the United States has finally reached that point in its cycle of being the most powerful nation on earth that it is literally now going to collapse, as every other empire inevitably in history always has. Is it going to happen at some point? If anybody's going to do it, it'll be Trump. But you can't second guess quite how this is going to end up. You can see how it could end up. You can see as I've just gone over, basically the logical conclusion to how these things could go up. But then logic doesn't necessarily apply to these people. And as you've also said, when it comes to fascism as well, they don't respect the rules of democracy anyway. They don't see them as answerable to any sort of higher power or governing body. Therefore, what sort of brakes are going to be placed on them? Okay, things could go through the court system all the way up to the Supreme Court. Well, Trump already loaded them as well. So even then, you can't guarantee a winner at the end of it. And at the end of the day, the only people who are going to end up really losing ultimately are going to be the ordinary people in the United States, because the one group of federal employees you can guarantee will not be touched by this are the ones that have got anything to do with any of the multitude of government contracts Elon Musk has got.
This is why I say about like the left needing to be a bit more mean, because, and I mean this in a social sense, but in a more practical sense, I suppose you could say that fascism was only removed from the world under the brutal heel of the American military machine. Literally crushed from the world. As it should have been, but it's something that you have to force out. That you can't sort of play nicely and play chess with. You have to just like knock over the board and crush them. Like there's no two ways about that. That there is a real need to be like, and I'm not suggesting actual or literal violence, at this stage. What I'm suggesting is that our rhetoric needs to be combative. It needs to be out there. It needs to be, we are showing up and we are doing the fighting, because actually I think a lot of left unity will come from having left-wing voices who stand up and go, no, fuck you, we are going to fight back against this, and we're going to fight, come to us, we're going to fight back against it, and we're going to fight back against it hard. Which, that is so much of what, Jeremy Corbyn or Bernie Sanders would have provided, was just a voice to unify around, even if you don't agree with everything that they said.
You brought up Corbyn as a perfect example of pacifism and not wanting to engage, or not wanting to resort to violence, or always making sure that violence was never seen as the answer to anything. And it's not. It isn't. All conflicts, all wars, whatever, they all end up coming down to a negotiation around a table at some point. But I take your point about the left. The thing is, with America, they haven't really got one. There is no left in America. You have got the right wing in the Republicans, and you've got a liberal Democratic Party who are, and let's face it, there's no bigger enabler of fascism on this world than liberals, because they will happily side with that over the left every single time. And there's plenty of evidence for that in the history books. And as much as we will not advocate for violence, and as much as we will seek for a negotiation and talks and convincing and arguing and presenting a case against that there is a better way, and this way is what we believe as left wingers. Equally, you've got this you've got this mess that you've got to fight with fascism anyway. You can't advocate for warfare or anything like that, when at the end of the day that's only going to play into their own arguments and their own needs, and you just can't win once you go down that route. So you get to that talking point, you get to that negotiation point, you get to that point where you make your case and you convince people to say, no, this is the way to do it, and we change the way this world goes, this country goes. You drag the Overton window back to the left, because it's been dragged too far to the right in too many countries by too many individuals. You get too much press attention, from your Trumps to your Farages to your Le Pens to the AfD, to Benjamin Netanyahu and everyone else. It's just too much focus and too much attention on them and their politics and what they are doing, and not the alternative and the answers to that. And they need to be presented, and they need to be platformed. And this is where the media plays a role, because mainstream media is hopeless. And this is the whole reason my YouTube channel even came into being. It was because mainstream media is just so bad, so right-wing, so dominated by people born with silver spoons in their mouths who've never had to struggle a day in their lives. They've only been able to get into that because they've been able to get into an unpaid intern job somewhere, and mummy and daddy can support them while they learn their trade and so on. And then but of course they become crafted by the people around them who are just the same as they are. And then they lose focus, lose track, and lose sense of what actually they might have got into it to be. And this is when it's become so important that more and more of us have become our own media. And more and more of us speak out and tell the truth as it is from a left perspective, and say, no, actually, what they've been saying and the arguments they're presenting, be they politicians or be they in the media, are nonsense. And this is why, because this is what we can do instead. And more we need to keep that going. Social media is fantastic. It's offered all of us a platform to be able to do that. But equally, the thorn in it is the fact that platforms like Twitter, for example, are owned by Elon Musk, and it's become manipulated and it becomes damaged, and you end up in a situation where you've got some platforms you're fighting against as well.
Yes, yeah, 100%. You said earlier about the idea of the eternal empire, and it made me think of two things. It made me think of obviously the phrase under the Third Reich was the 1,000-year Reich. That was supposedly what they were building, but the 1,000-year Reich. How did that go? Didn't go very well, did it?
Years, not quite.
Yes, not quite. But also, it made me think of a quote that I saw on TikTok the other day, which was, the world is littered with the remains of empires that thought they were eternal. And I think it's something that America should perhaps bear in mind.
Such thing. There's no such thing. All empires end up coming to an end somehow. And you got Trump, looking at Trump and Musk, you can't help but thinking you've got two of the worst people in power you possibly could have. And you really ought to think long and hard about that, because you've got them now for the best part of 4 years.
Absolutely. That's a really good place to cut that section. So before we finish, we are going to read and react to some of your comments. Firstly, though, I want to remind you that we are all still volunteers at Turn Left, and we are doing our best to produce content around our paid work. If we want to become a fully fledged media organisation, we need your help. Please like and share our content and help us out financially by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can make a one-off donation or give us a small donation each month to keep us going. We are now also on Blue Sky, the fast-growing social media alternative to Twitter, so do go and check out our work on there. Let's have a look at these comments then, and our producer will be joining us for this section. I just want to check and get confirmation from the audience. Sarah, would you mind saying something so that we can just test?
Hello. Can
Awesome.
everyone hear me?
Okay, yeah. What I want to know, people in the chat, is can you hear Sarah?
Please let me know you can hear me. Hello.
That would be, yes, that would be enormously
Perfect.
helpful. We hear you. Excellent. Excellent.
Amazing. Jim the legend
Superb.
coming through. How are we? What a great show, I think, so far. It's been so brilliant. There's been so many amazing comments too. I think let's just go back a little bit to when you were talking about the German elections, and there was this comment by Flow Snake, and it says, and they went way above the magic 5% mark, which I assume will mean more people will see them as a not wasted vote in future, which I thought was quite interesting. I mean, even just thinking about the German elections as a whole, with what you were saying, Cog, and you as well, Damo, like you guys did such an amazing analysis, but the left's path forward has to be incredibly clear, like in terms of mobilization and organization, and a real focus on how class is intertwined with all of these other protected characteristics too. So their ability to kind of buck polling trends should be seen as an indication that there is space for a real like leftist alternative, one that kind of speaks directly to material conditions of the working class, rather than engaging in this endless defensive posture that I think has defined so much of like contemporary leftist politics. So I don't know, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
10%. I'll let Damien go first. Go for it.
See, this is the bit of the show I was afraid of. Oh my God, what are they going to serve up to us? Right. Yeah. The 5% mark it's a huge barrier to cross, and obviously the media will have made some noise about the fact how important it is to get above that 5% point. And yes, I think there is certainly an argument here for saying more people will not see them as a wasted vote. They shouldn't be seeing them as that as anyway, when that is literally all there is in Germany that passes for the left. That's it. Even their Green Party, and I say this as a Green member of the Green Party of England and Wales, even their Green Party is not particularly left at all. And De Linke, as I've said in the show, has got issues that I've got concerns about, but I'm cynical and I'm picky like that. But at any rate, it's a start. They're making the right moves. They made the right noises. They've come out with an excellent campaign, and they got above that 5% mark. Now it's on them to build on that again. They can't just, oh, well, it's over now and we'll have to wait till next time. They have to keep this momentum going. Now they've got it. So they need to make sure that they're being heard and carry on with these videos. I think they were brilliant. I think it's really well made, well put together. Make more of them. Keep going. Don't just leave it for election time. I think this is something that far too many political parties around the world do. If you want to make a difference, you want to really challenge and show that there is a left voice, then you need to get noticed. The same criticism is being made in this country with the Green Party, that they're not vocal enough, they're not making enough noise, when they are basically the largest party left in this country that is anything like the left. And obviously a lot of the left from Labour left Labour to go to the Greens, like I did. But equally, that needs to come from the Green Party leaders now, the Green Party MPs. They need to be more vocal, more heard. They don't get put on the media like your Farages do, though, do they? They don't get that same platform. It's not an equal media playing field. And De Linke must realise that as much as anyone else must. And they're going to have to work harder as a result.
Under the Bundestag system, that 5% is really important. But we have had a sort of like mirror of this in the UK with Momentum, and it's sad that Momentum have kind of died a death since Jeremy Corbyn's. Since Jeremy Corbyn was pushed out of the Labour Party in the purge. It sounds strange saying that. I sound like I feel like I'm talking like a conspiracy theorist, but like it's just not a conspiracy at this point. It's just a fact that the left have been purged from the Labour Party. I mean, Keir Starmer's putting out deportation videos, Trump style. Like it's just a fact that the left have been purged from the party, and Corbyn in particular. But I think that Momentum had the right idea. Momentum had the right idea with the videos they were putting out that were like pumping out these little sketches and stuff. I remember one with where it was like a crowd of constituents talking to their MP who was on a stage, it clearly been filmed in a community hall, but it was really good. And they had a billionaire sort of sat on a throne hoarding all the money, like literally like holding a bag of money. Like, no, we can't touch his wealth. We have to get rid of the immigrant at the back. And they're all like, what? You mean Steve? And it's not Steve's fault, like that's the kind of stuff they were doing. And we need stuff like that. We need that kind of media output going on social media, stuff that's kind of populist, that doesn't, it's not necessarily this format. Do you know what I mean? It's more of a kind of like a quick draw, kind of like, here's a political point we're making, and we'll do it through like a funny sketch or something, or by a video where we're just doing an advert and literally like pointing at the people who we're against.
Absolutely. And I think just kind of going off that point, because you guys had mentioned politics in Britain and how it's kind of like shifted, particularly with like Starmer and what he's attempting to do. And this ties in quite nicely with Edward's point about the problem these far right parties, they might not actually get in power, but they move you over to Windows/consensus so far to the right that elected parties end up doing their policies. And I think we've seen that quite considerably with Starmer's stance on immigration and the deportations that he's now doing as a result. So yeah, very, very interesting. I don't know if you guys wanted to comment on that as well.
Yeah, it's a signposts and weather vanes argument, isn't it? Starmer is very much a weather vane. Nigel Farage has shown the way, and he's hot on his heels. Can't get there fast enough. And the Overton window, as you say, gets dragged further and further to the right because they're trying to copy Tory policy. They're trying to copy Reform UK policy. They haven't actually got any of their own. And now the economy is in a mess as it is at the moment. And Rachel Reeves is now trying to take people's savings to try and force them into stocks and shares instead, and coming after the benefits claimants again, because it's always their fault, isn't it? And then there's the migrants as well on top of that. And none of it works. And we know it doesn't work because we've had 14 years of the Tories showing us it doesn't work. But they're going to carry on doing it regardless because they can't touch the billionaires' wealth. I think the example you said, I think it was a party political statement at the time, wasn't it? It was brilliantly made, and it made a brilliant point, and it hit home because it made it so obvious. Now, hang on a minute, you've got these people here, the billionaire class, the super rich in this country, they have 40% of all the wealth in this country, and it's untouched because they basically bought our politics with it. And that's why they won't come after them. No politician will go after them because that's the donors. We can't touch them. We need them come the next election. Everyone else hates us, so we'll need their money to get into power again. And that's how it goes. And, nothing ever changes as a result. And the country, no matter who you vote for, only these people at the top are the only ones who get served.
Yeah.
It's not democracy, is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes. I was going to say that we've got a reasonably close relationship with the Green Party. We're all sort of Green Party fans here. And one of the things that we've been sort of pushing for the Green Party to do is any time that there's, a billionaire gets a tax cut, a report comes out on how a green industrial revolution would be amazing for the country and the benefits it could bring to people. Anytime any report like that comes out, any kind of like positive social change that we see, the Green Party should instantly be calling press conference, because that's what Nigel Farage does anytime a migrant lands on the border of Dover. Like anytime anything happens, it's like, right, press conference, and you hammer it in. And that is how you, just by being as annoying as possible, drive the political spectrum to the right or to the left, depending on your political persuasion. And we want to be driving it to the left.
You're seizing the moment. You're stealing the thunder of whatever has happened. You're the one that's now taking a lead on it. And it needs to be Carla Denyer or Adrian Ramsey, the two co-leaders of the Green Party, doing that. It shouldn't have to be Zach Polanski every time, because it always seems to be him that ends up front and center on the social media posts or on the news bulletins or something like that. Zach's great. Zach is a brilliant speaker. He is really good, but he's the deputy leader and he's on the London Assembly, and people should be hearing it from the leaders of the party. So really, I mean, Carla Denyer, she does quite often pop up now and again, as often as Green parties do. Adrian Ramsey, be critical of one of my own party leaders. You don't see him. Where is he? I mean, I want to see him as well speaking out, and it shouldn't just be on Carla. It shouldn't just be on Zach. steal the thunder, as you said. You think one of these dudes does this thing, call that press conference, then you've got the focus all on you. You've got press coverage for the Green Party for a change because you've grasped it, you've demanded it, you've brought the media focus onto yourself. Then run with it, and you'll see your polling numbers go up instead of Reform UK's all the bloody time.
Exactly.
Absolutely, completely agree. And sorry, I know that I can talk forever and I do need to move on to other comments, but I do just want to say, like, on that point, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like the time for passive resistance is just so over. Like when you were saying we need to be meaner, like that's what needs to happen on the left. And I think the only way forward is to be so uncompromising, like have a movement that kind of refuses to cede ground to like the politics of fear and division, and just like, yeah, press forward. So the question isn't whether to fight, because that's obviously what's going to happen, not physically obviously, but it's just whether to win. But yeah, just quickly then going to Rebecca Goodwin, they're just misogynist, I think, is such a relevant point. And if I have to see one more fresh and fit or like Tate-esque podcast pop up on my For You page or on YouTube, I'm literally going to cry. It's so irritating to see these men kind of demean these women in such a way that they think that that's how they're going to line their pockets, ridicule their work, undermine their dignity, and normalize abusive rhetoric. Actually, like there was toxic language and aggression in their tone. Not only did they obviously demean Goodwin, but I do see this sort of precedent kind of carrying a lot of weight, I think, in the toxic manosphere of male podcasts that choose to focus so much on the world of dating and traditional relationships and blah blah blah. So yeah, I think their actions demonstrated a lot of misogyny. There was another comment, sorry, here. OnlyFans isn't just sex work, it's purely a monetized platform, but it's a form of liberation for a lot of women and minorities that have been dragged down into believing that they are second-class citizens. Absolutely. So true. And I think anyone who knows me, Cog knows me very well, all I do most of the time, I think when Cog first met me online, I would speak so much about women's place within society and how we're viewed and the harm that is caused by the enabling of misogyny and people who exercise misogyny. So I'm hoping there'll be an end to that at some point soon.
On that comment, I just want to say that one of the things that makes modern sex work so dangerous is that they are precluded from so many social media platforms. And then being precluded from so many social media platforms means that communicating about potentially dangerous clients and blacklisting clients becomes much harder. So they're much more at risk. I just want to put that out there because it's relevant to the fact that OnlyFans has gained that reputation because it allows them on there, and that should always be seen as a positive for their safety rather than a negative, you know.
Absolutely. And I think just like a shameless plug just to like the charities that work to protect sex workers in the UK, like there's NUM, like National Ugly Mugs, that does an incredible work, a 24/7 helpline, and then also the ECP, English collective of prostitutes as well, a grassroots organisation that campaigns for the decriminalisation of sex work. So just a shameless plug there. But I just want to like press on as well. I'm so sorry, guys. I feel like because the time. But there was this comment from Becca that I thought was quite interesting. This is more directed towards you, Cog. Also, Damon, you know, you got a lot of comments about how amazing you are, by the way, and I was starring them. Like they were just bigging you up, saying that you're incredible. But this one, Cog is very knowledgeable about Nazi Germany. I'd like to know his views comparing pre-World War II Germany and USA today.
I agree. I'd like to hear all about this as well. Go on,
Cog. So I think it's not a linear structure. The Jim Crow era influenced a lot of the Nuremberg laws that we saw in 1935, and so there is this sort of circle. It's not a linear structure of like, oh well, the Nazi Germany, that there's a lot of comparison between them, because actually Nazi Germany itself is comparable to the earlier USA because it's where they learned a lot of their things about discrimination. A lot of their structures of discrimination came in. I think that there is a lot you can learn. I think that could be an entire video in itself. But some things that I would point out, and perhaps since we're talking about anti-feminism and men and women, it was Herman Rausching, I think his name is, who was a former NSDAP member, a former member of the Nazi Party, but who broke away from the party in 1934, who said that ultimately Nazism could never have ceased its perpetual motion. Like the motion led it into, there's no logic to it. It was just constant movement, and that constant movement absorbed Europe, right? When things became so self-contradictory at home, what did they do? Well, they had to expand. They'd already got the system of method bills and an economy that was like barely holding itself up and was doing so based on a debt that had accumulated to make Hitler look good. So they had to expand into the East. I believe it's the historian Tim Mason who sort of makes that argument. But I'm kind of getting away from the point here, because the point I wanted to make was that this anti-feminism and this kinetic force are tied into each other, and at its core, fascism is movement, right? The idea of sitting and thinking is essentially effeminate. It's effeminizing, right? Sitting and thinking is emasculating. What does the soldier do on the battlefield? The soldier moves on the battlefield. This is how the fascist thinks. It's why strong men who say it like it is and who look like they're moving constantly and who pretend that they're moving constantly, who are chaotic, who meme, who are in constant movement, so appealing to these movements. It's because it's a masculinist energy. If you want to take apart a fascist, the first thing you have to go after is their masculinity, because that is at their core, at the core of their ideology, what keeps their movement going. The success of a fascist is tied in because it's tied to their masculinity, because masculinity is about control and success to these people. There's a huge amount I could say about this, but it could be a whole video in itself, so I hope you'll forgive me if I leave it there. And I hope that was sort of like, I ended up talking more about fascist than specific stuff between the USA and the UK, but that's stuff that I would be looking out for. Did I say USA and UK? USA and Nazi Germany. Freudian slip there.
Was it a Freudian slip?
Yeah, for a Freudian slip there. But yeah, I could draw comparison, but I won't get into specifics because I think it's just an interesting thing to talk about. But I don't want to keep everyone going because we have got a lot of comments to get through. Sorry.
Yeah, we do have a lot of comments, but that was just so brilliantly articulated. But yeah, so going on to the last story that you did, found this one quite interesting. Where is it? Sorry, my producing skills are not 10 out of 10 yet, but from Jacqueline, they probably fired the most competent and efficient members of the workforce thanks to their racism and bigotry. And I think this is just so accurate, because what we're seeing at the moment, and this is what Damo said actually, in terms of the fascism that's now taking a stronghold with these individuals who are now in power. Like, you know, Musk has this role about efficiency, and the other day had that chainsaw that he was using as a means to like symbolize all the job cuts that he's doing. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that, with what's happening in the US and what's happening now, I guess?
I've spoken for a very long time. Please, Damien, take this one.
I think it's largely right. And again, it comes back to that whole feelings of inadequacy. And in fact, actually, it works quite well in your oratory a moment ago regarding masculinity, because it's emasculating for people to know more than they do. It's emasculating for them, for people to be better and more efficient at these things than they are. And they might be getting paid a lot more money than these people, and all of a sudden they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, these people are better than this than me. They might come after my job. They might take my money. I've got to get rid of them. And that's how it goes. And it is racism quite often, because it's even worse if it's a person of color for your average white supremacist. And it's even worse if it's a woman for your average bigot and misogynist. And it's a story as old as time. It's gone on numerous times, over and over again. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. And I think just one last comment and then we'll wrap it up. But Rachel said, the mass firing of veterans and cutting of their benefits is going to have unforeseen consequences for Musk and Trump. So I guess, what do you foresee with these mass firing of veterans and cutting of their benefits? How will it negatively impact Trump and Musk going forward?
And I think it definitely had unforeseen circumstances if any of these veterans and other people actually ended up voting for Trump and Musk, thinking they were going to be looked after. And a lot of that has been based, again, in racism and bigotry, I fancy, as well. Ultimately, for Musk and Trump, depends on the media, doesn't it? It seems to come full circle for them each time. There's so much in the way of right-wing media in the US as much as there is in the UK and Germany and anywhere else. You're going to have your Fox Newses and your OANs shilling for them constantly and saying how wonderful they are and the sunshine shines out of Donald Trump's orange peel posterior. But it's not true, and people will not feel it. They will not feel better off. They will not feel like the country is getting any better. They will still be being convinced to blame anybody that isn't the same color as they are. They will still be convinced to blame it's Mexico and it's Canada and their fentanyl, and it'll be any manner of people that we can't slap tariffs on and keep slapping tariffs on us, because that's got to be their fault, and we'll just punish them with yet more tariffs. And that's his answer to everything these days, isn't it? I think they're going to end up becoming a cropper all of their own volition, because fascists always do. They always end up destroying themselves. And eventually something will be done that's so obvious and so blatant and so awful that no amount of media shilling or covering for them is going to make any difference. After all, it only took one presidency for Trump to get dumped out of power the first time. It's rather unfortunate his successor was not a great deal better, that saw him delivered back into power for a second time.
Yeah, I think we can bank on him being a disaster, but I also think there's an analogy potentially with the most dangerous time for somebody who's in an abusive relationship is when they go to leave that abusive relationship. Like, that is the most dangerous time for them. It's when they're at the most risk of violence. And I think similarly with Trump, I think the time when it's going to be most dangerous for democracy is when he has to eventually leave, because I can't see him getting a second term, assuming a fair election. So they'll either try and rig the election or they'll try and ignore the results. And this is a crazy thing to be saying about the hegemonic power of the 21st century. It's wild. It's like, I can't believe that I'm saying it, but I genuinely think that is going to be a problem. I just want to draw attention to one more comment, if that's okay. I starred it. I'll just bring it up. Because I think this is an interesting one, and I want to know your two thoughts, actually. So during the Kamala campaign, there was the whole calling. I think it was particularly J.D. Vance, but also Trump supporters in general, weird. And Becca says the weird thing was good from Walz, but they didn't lean into it. I think pointing out the fash were weird, odd, peculiar, and nasty as fuck. Because most people want to live and let live, and I think this is actually a really good way to get under their skin, undermine their masculinity, and actually start to attack them in a way that is genuinely effective, and also you can get a bit nasty with it. What do you guys think to that?
Damo, do you want to take it and I can go with that?
Certainly, producer. I wouldn't dare to overstep my mark. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Actually, it was clever, and it was so easy as well, because Musk is weird, and JD Vance is really weird, and Trump is weird as well, and they could have run with this and had a lovely time with it, but instead they were insisting on we're just going to be continuity Biden, and nobody was cheering that, really, were they? So they had a golden opportunity there. I think you picked up on a really, really, very, really excellent point there, actually, that this chap Walz, I thought he was very good. I did warm to the chap. I thought he was a very good orator, a very good public performer. And yes, this was weird. If they just pumped out constant, Trump being an orange weirdo and Musk not being able to string a cogent sentence together and sounding like he's an algorithm, a human that an algorithm has written, and where they got JD Vance from is beyond me. Has anybody picked up on his book? That's a weird one, that is. It's a strange one. They could have had a field day with this, and it was just a missed opportunity. And I wish I'd thought of this point myself during the election campaign, because I didn't think of it either. but then I'm not a politician. Probably a good job too. Yeah, no, I think they were onto something. They could have been onto something here. I think they should have listened to Waltz.
I agree. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Definitely onto something. Like, Trump is weird, not just in his aesthetic, but kind of in like his political incoherence. Like, and I think it was a missed opportunity. Like, go hard, like go in on it. Like, that was an opportunity to really, really dissect what is weird. Like, the real weirdness isn't in questioning power. I think it's in accepting a world where a handful of billionaires are able to get into positions of power and control more wealth than billions of workers. So, like, that could have been a really, really great opportunity to just unpack, another favorite word, unpack so much of the weirdness that goes on amongst the elites. Because what is weird is, like the fact that we all there isn't maybe enough public anger at corporate greed. Or what is weird is that we're seeing loads of these individuals in and around just global politics as a whole, leaning into the right and doing things like Nazi salutes as though it's the easiest thing in the world. So I don't know, there's lots of weirdness going on, but it could have been a way to really, really capitalize on the absurdity of politics at the moment. So I think the truly weirdest thing at the moment is pretending that any of this is normal, and some people are pretending as though this is normal stuff that's happening day in and day out, but no, it's not normal at all.
I think it's worth
normal stuff on Normal Island.
True. I think it's worth pointing out that when the Reality Check podcast got walked out on, that was when they looked most uncomfortable, because it was very clear they'd been socially rejected. Social rejection is really difficult for them to deal with. If they're just being like shouted at or something, they can deal with that. That's not a problem. But entirely socially rejecting them, going, you are the weirdos in this room. You are the strange people. Like, no one wants to be associated with your shit. That is quite powerful. And that's not the same as going, you guys are dangerous, I don't like you. That's the same as going, now you're just a bit pathetic and we're out of here. We're leaving you behind. You know? It's a very different feel to it.
Yeah, and a better way of responding to that, I think, is to make more of the cleverness of Becky Goodwin and less about what actually happened to her, because the worst thing that could possibly happen for this podcast now is that people stop talking about it. Because at the minute, their infamy is what's benefiting them the most. As much as I've talked about defunding and, who is really, are you the sort of person who wants to pay to listen to these prats? Really? Shame on you. But equally, we're here talking about them. And lots of people are talking about them. And frankly, now they've been talked about, we need to stop talking about them, because now we're just giving them free publicity. And really, it's a podcast that deserves to die a death.
That's true, and I do want their podcast to die a death. But I think the thing is, they'll never be taken seriously again, and that is the weirdo effect, right?
Yeah,
it's the like these people will be brought up, but they'll be brought up to be mocked. It's not like the sort of Myron Gaines type, or Andrew Tate type, where there's that bit of element of like, oh, they're dangerous and they got lots of followers. It's like these guys didn't have a lot of followers to begin with, and now they've shown themselves to be complete prats, and everybody is either angry with them or laughing at them because they're such like twats and so obviously like socially maladjusted that I think actually they're probably going to die a death anyway.
As a result, they won't get funded as much, except by people who are just as bad, if not worse, than they are.
Literally,
there are few.
Yeah, that incident on the podcast, definitely a microcosm of a larger cultural issue that needs addressing. And I think it's a stark illustration of how misogyny can really flourish in media spaces that prize aggressive and narrow definitions of masculinity. So I hope that there are more people that kind of counteract that narrative by calling it out. I think we live in a culture where a lot of people do just stand on the sidelines. The bystander effect is well and truly very real, and I think that that's the reason why a lot of these things flourish and thrive. So
100%. I was just going to say, a lot of the people who would financially back them and would find them cool hopefully will be so embarrassed by this stuff, where they have like been, I mean, you should see their comment section, they are being rinsed They are being like hung out to
Good.
dry, cooked, taken back inside, put back in the pan, cooked again. Like, it is embarrassing what is happening to them in their own comments section. And you just can't sort of recover from that. And the sort of temptation to like feed them with money is probably going to be a lot less if it's like actually embarrassing to be associated with them. And that's kind of what I'd want.
No, I agree.
Absolutely, completely agree. Bet, I think that's it for the comments. It's been so great.
Excellent. Thank you very much,
you.
Sarah. Appreciate you you bringing those up. Good stuff. And I think we will round off the show there. I'm so sorry that it's gone on for as long as it has. We've extended
what
quite
to
a bit.
say. That's the trick. If you've got somebody on who can't shut up, then you're whale of a time, aren't you? Really?
Oh yeah, because I'm the same. We've just got too much to say. That's always the problem with these shows.
I'm familiar and quiet. I don't know what you pulled out of me. See,
it's crazy. So yeah, that is all we have time to for today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and to Damien for coming on. We have a show on Thursday evening, so please do tune in for that. Please do give us a follow on Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. We are all over the place. I don't think we're on OnlyFans yet, but we're working on it. You can just search for Turn Left Media. We will be a fully fledged media organisation one day, mark my words. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.